we can get started. So a very warm welcome, Bianca, to Martin's Chi channel, and I believe this is your second time with us.
A repeat performance. Thank
Repeat.
you.
Yes, you're in big demand. And I had the great pleasure of meeting you in New York City, I believe, about a year or so ago. And Bianca, of course, she is in California, in U.S., and she's a published book author. She wrote a book a few years ago, and now she has just written another book, Make Time to Heal, and we are very pleased to have you. And Bianca is a longtime student of Master Ming Tong Gu. So, Bianca, I will turn it over to you if you like to start your prepared teaching, your talk. So just to let everyone know, Bianca will be giving a teaching, a talk based on her new book, Make Time to Heal, which of course you can publish on Amazon. And then there will be a Q&A. So please do ask any questions you have. You can open your mic to ask a question, or you can put it in chat. And then also along the way, Bianca will also be leading some Qigong practice. So warm welcome, Bianca. It's all yours. You can start.
Thank you so much, Amir, Martin, and everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are.
Yes.
Delighted to have you here. And one question before I begin, Martin, I think I have this right, but we're going to follow the Q&A with the practice, or are we going to end with the Q&A?
I think we will. It's up to you. I mean, after your talk, maybe we can do a Q&A. But it's up to you. About 7 to 10 minutes. It usually goes to like 10, 15.
Okay, so that would be 8:15 here, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, well, I'll go with the flow.
Great.
So, all right. So, good morning again, and afternoon and evening, everyone. Delighted to be here on this last day of September, the harvest season time, and brings to mind the fact that in the practice we cultivate the Qi in the hopes of harvesting with some results, and sometimes we're lucky enough to get really some good healing results. And I was fortunate that in my practice that's what happened, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. My first big reflection on everything, if I had to give, sum up wisdom healing Qigong, healing itself, our experience, I would just say, and this sounds very, I guess, 60s, but I would say love is the answer. Love is what you need. You're bringing love to the practice, and through that love, you're sharing it with everyone else, but you're also maybe learning or relearning how to love yourself, because in the process of life, very often we forget that. And I know that's what happened to me. So when I say this, it's not like this kind of a lecture. It's more, this has been my experience. And if it can resonate for you, then maybe there's something here for you. So I had to learn how to love myself. I didn't know, and I didn't realize that at a cellular level, we respond to loving ourselves. And this practice helps with that as well. So, and love does heal all. Love heals all wounds. And with that in mind, what I would like us to do is start off with a practice, with a La Qi practice, which many of you know, but I'll explain a little bit. And then I'm also going to demonstrate, I thought part of what I would do, I do some things on video that I can't demonstrate in the book. And my background before I had to retire from the fatigue and pain and tremor of Qigong, I was a teacher. And I floated back and forth. I spent my first years teaching regular education. Then I went into special education for about 10 years, and then went into, after special education, went back into regular education for another 10. But in the process, especially with special education, and then also having an autistic son, I learned how to adapt. So, and I did actually teach for a few years adaptive physical education to a group of students. So when working with my own clients, I found some ways to make the practices a little bit easier sometimes in the beginning. And that doesn't mean when I'm showing these adaptations that the goal isn't eventually to do it without adaptation. That is the eventual goal. But sometimes when you're dealing with physical conditions, with stiffness, with tremor, it can get to the point where it's very distracting. And so I want you to have some options for that. So anyway, that being said, first I'm going to demonstrate La Qi and the open heart version of it without adaptation, and then with it. And I've got this handy dandy rolling chair, so I can hopefully move back so you can see me, maybe see my arms a little better. Can you see my arms now?
Yes.
Okay, so La Qi is the most basic and also probably the most representative wisdom healing Qigong practice, in that it's energy in, energy out. And at a very simple level, that's what we're always doing when we're doing a practice: energy in, energy out. And what we do with La Qi is we hold our hands out, and these are our tiger's mouth, the area, the curved area between the thumb and the index finger. And we want those facing each other, and we want them to be at the same level. We want them to be at the same height and same level, and we want them to be flat, so that if I had a piece of paper on my hands, it wouldn't fall. It's not tilted this way or this way, it's straight. And maybe our fingertips are about 4 to 6 inches apart. And then we open slowly for maybe another 4 to 6 inches, and then we close. Now, the movement and generates not from the elbows, not from the arms, but from the shoulder blades. And that's important, because that is really ideally what we want. Now, sometimes we're in a crowded position or whatever, and we, if we do this, it still works. We can still have the intention and it still works, but I want you to focus on the shoulder blades. Particularly, I know that a number of people who are watching, they have Parkinson's and be dealing with stiff shoulder and frozen shoulder. And so it's a challenge, but it also, if you can do it even a little bit, it starts to feel better. And I will show you how to do it adaptively in a moment. So first, what we do, again, what we're going to, when we're going to say, there are a number of different things that we can say. Kai ha, meaning open and close. For this one, we're opening the heart. We're going to say how la. So how when we open, la when we close. And how la in itself can be a practice, because it's a beautiful message. It's giving yourself, your body, your cells, the message that all is well and getting better. So with that being said, we're going to position our hands as I have them here near our heart. We're going to visualize the heart and the beautiful radiant light emitting from the heart. And as we open, the light diffuses and becomes a little thinner. And then as we close, the light concentrates and becomes thicker and more intense. And I like to close my eyes to really help me focus. And closing eyes is a really good thing to do. If you're learning something, if you're learning a practice, then of course you want to keep your eyes open. So here we start opening our hearts. How la. How la. How la. How la. Feet are grounded on the floor. How la. How la. Heart is open. How la. Connecting. How la. Sharing. How la. Healing. How la. relaxing, Howla, loving, Howla, 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 connecting, Howla, opening, Howla, sharing, Howla, 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 feeling, smiling, inner smile, slowly bring hands down over navel, women right hand first, then left hand first. Take a few deep breaths. Slowly, gently open hands and eyes. Thank you. I don't know about you, but I feel better. And what I'd like to do now is, without actually going into a formal practice, I want to demonstrate how you would do this if you had really stiff shoulders and wanted to get the wingspan type movement, didn't want to be tight. One way that I have found helpful in the past is pillows. So I take pillows and put them under my armpits, and they're not too thick. They're fairly pliable pillows, nice size. Put them under my armpits, and then I have my shoulder blades are open a little more, and I'm doing the practice with a little bit of support. So that's something that you can try and see if that works for you. And it's just a suggestion of one way that you might be able to work with the practice. So the I also wanted to let you know that how I'm going to go through this. So now that we've done a practice, I'm going to select various cherry pick from various chapters of the book. So I didn't get into every. Oh, by the way, the book I think Amir said is "Make Time to Heal." It's available right now on Amazon or via my website www.metamorphics.com. That's METTAMORPHIX.com. You're welcome to go there. There's a lot of information there, as well as the books. And what I'd like to do is perhaps maybe have a link in the Kindle version of the book, because the Kindle isn't out yet, to this lesson. So we're going to go through the first chapter that I chose, although it's not in order of the book. The book starts out talking about my story, but the chapter that I chose to start with is anxiety. And I will tell you why. This book was informed by my own experience with Parkinson's, but also by the work that I've been doing with people for a number of years now. And I find that anxiety comes up frequently with just about everyone. And it can be a precursor of Parkinson's. It can certainly be a feature of Parkinson's or any chronic condition. Can make one very anxious. I really got irritated this past summer, and I think this spring. There was a commercial on TV put out by a pharmaceutical company for a drug for Parkinson's, and it showed, it was a black and white, and it showed a man having hallucinations, and it was scary. And a number of people that I worked with, actually, it produced a lot of anxiety for them. And so I thought, you know, we need to find ways to empower ourselves. And when we're faced with a situation like that, so, okay, you're sitting in front of the TV. Remember that you're in control, literally in control. So you can mute the sound, which is what I suggest doing. I do it for every commercial. I don't want to be fed that stuff. So I will mute the sound, and every time a commercial comes on, I'm going into a practice, whether it's La Chi or whether it's a gratitude practice, and I'll get into more of that. But go ahead and do a practice. One of the practices that you might want to do, sometimes when you're feeling a lot of anxiety, you want to move. So one of the things that you can do very easily is just stand up and do hip rotations. And I'm going to show you a little, well, hip rotations, you know, normally we've got our feet shoulder width apart, knees are slightly bent, lower gate is closed, tongue is touching upper palate, shoulders are relaxed, and we have our hands on our rib cage area as we're doing it. And we would move very exaggeratedly in all four directions, as if they were points on a compass. And remember that the compass is round, so we're making a circle. So we're going first to one side, and then forward, then to the other, and then all the way back. And we continue to do that. And you can visualize the spiral, because energy travels in spirals, and you can visualize the spiral going all the way down to Mother Earth and transforming that anxiety. So you no longer need to have it, or at least not have an undue amount of it. And so, and we would go one way and then stop and go the other way. And the same thing, again, exaggerated as we can. Back, side, forward, side. Back, side, forward, side. Now, sometimes we want to feel a little more in our bodies, and sometimes it might be good to start with your hands on your navel, and actually, if you want to feel centered and feel what that feels like, because sometimes when you've got some kind of a neurological condition or whatever, you really want to reconnect with your body, and starting here is fine too. And you can go again, side, front, back. And so that might be a way even to begin the practice. And then as you're feeling it more, then you can move to the hands on the hips. So that's another suggestion for doing the practice. Another practice that I think is wonderful for anxiety, excuse me while I try to, okay, zero in here again, is sound healing. And for me, sound healing was what actually got me to make friends with my body. Because I started, all my life, I had just treated my body as though it were excess baggage, something I had to drag along in my day. And then I realized, as I was doing the sound healing, because I did it daily and still do, that, oh, I have a heart, I have kidneys, I have a liver, I have lungs, I have a digestive system. I never really thought of that. And so I began making friends with my body. And I was surprised at how I could tell that I felt different when I was done with sound healing. And sound healing is a very beautiful practice. I mention it in my first book, Reboot and Rejoice. Chapter 6 gives all the sounds and how to pronounce them phonetically. Also, Ming Tung Gu at the Chi Center has a beautiful CD set that gives the sounds, and there's a beautiful chart with the different colors and pronunciation guides. So there are several ways to do it. I'm not going to go through the sounds with you today, except to give maybe just a quick demonstration, because some of the sounds actually, I think, reflect the emotions that they're working with, or they all do actually. So for anger, the organ that we're working with is the kidney, and is the liver. I'm sorry. For anger, we're working with the liver, and the first sound that we make is. So it almost sounds like we're spitting at someone. So that kind of helped me remember the first sound for each organ. Or for instance, with the kidneys, that we're working with fear, and the first sound, fasten your seatbelts, is scary. It's like you're scaring the fear out of your kidneys. So anyway, I'm not going to go any further. Sound healing could take all day, and it's wonderful, beautiful practice. And I will say that after I had healed not too long before there was the Sandy Hook shooting at Christmas time. I don't know, about 5 years back, 6, 7, I don't remember. But it was on a December 14th, I remember that. And I had been in a very upbeat Christmas mood. It was like one of the first Christmases where I could actually wrap gifts. I had the dexterity where I could use tape and scissors instead of having to use gift bags. And I was just feeling very happy and grateful and joyous, and had written actually a very upbeat blog piece with a poem for Christmas. And just before I was going to send it, the news came of Sandy Hook, and I was devastated. I was really devastated, having, I'm sure we all were. And then I related as a parent, as a teacher, as a grandparent, as a mother of an autistic son, because news came out that the shooter they thought was autistic. So on so many levels, this just was this black cloud that surrounded me. And for several days, I did sound healing 3 times a day. And that got me through. That really got me through. So for any kind of emotional upset, I really recommend the sound healing. And another good one, again, if you feel like you want to move, and I would suggest doing spinal bone marrow rotations. And I'm going to do just a quick demo of how we normally do them. And then I'm going to show how I do it and explain, not how I do it, but how I have recommended for other people to do it, and explain why. So spinal bone marrow rotations, and again, I realize this may be repeat for a number of you, but we've got our feet again, shoulder width apart. We're always visualizing that our feet are have energy roots grounded deep into the earth with any practice that we're doing. And we also imagine that we have energy antlers or antennae sprouting up from our way, connecting with the heavens. So, and then we've got our arms out. Again, we have the tiger's mouth facing each other, and we're tongue touching upper palate, and we twist slowly and gently to one side. And don't over twist, don't push it. If you want to a little bit more with each rotation, you can twist a little bit further. Comfortably challenge yourself, but don't force it. And by going very slowly, it helps you not force it. And slow movement, I believe, is one of the keys with a neurological condition of reuniting the brain and the body and forging those new neural pathways, because you're really thinking about what you're doing. It gets you back into that mindfulness state. And so that's how we would be doing it normally. Now I'm going to show you, or I'll stop for a minute and I'll explain. I was working with someone who loved to walk and loved walking, and it was really good for her, but it's good for everyone. But very often with the Parkinson's, the toes would cramp up. And what helped uncramp the toes prior to walking was if she did the spinal bone marrow rotation practice. But that became very distracting because the tremor would really show up then, which is another opportunity for me to explain, and I'll probably repeat myself because it bears repeating. As we're healing, as the energy channels are opening, some symptoms will appear more intense. And with Parkinson's, it's very obvious that happens with the tremor. But it's kind of counterintuitive to believe something good is happening when the tremor is getting worse. So one of the things that I suggested, because I know from my own experience that pressure helps. So I suggested getting a beach ball and holding on to it. And it may not stop the tremor completely, but it'll give you something firm to hold on to. And then just turning, I'm going to go to the other side now because I didn't do that earlier. And, it's not perhaps perfect, but it's a good way to get the feel of the practice and to have some peace sometimes. There may be times when you can deal with the tremor and it doesn't, and still do the practice. There may be other times when you want to hold on to something like this, and you want to be able to just not think so much about the tremor. So that's another suggestion. And I think I'm basically through with my suggestions now. So sound healing, spinal bone marrow rotations, hip rotations are all, different ways to treat anxiety in the moment. And I also wanted to share that for many of us with chronic conditions, anxiety has been with us a good deal of our lives and may have even contributed to the condition. But we don't want to eliminate it entirely. A certain amount of anxiety is good, is okay. Something like performance anxiety helps you focus. So I want to give you a quote by, I think it was T.S. Eliot, who said, "Anxiety is the handmaiden of creativity." So when you feel that anxiety coming on, my suggestion is not to let it bully you, not to let it snowball, but okay, I recognize this is anxiety at this level. Here's what I'm going to do. I don't need to do anything, or maybe I'll do some practice. So instead of like, oh, anxiety, just meet it. You can be in control. You can gradually start working with it. I treated Parkinson's as a visiting professor, not an enemy. So I try and take whatever is going on with me and find a way to befriend it and then work with it. Might be a little bit of an unusual way of looking at things, but I think that helps with a positive attitude, which is so important to any healing situation. And that's why I want to talk about my story now, a little bit of my background story, and why I have difficulty sometimes getting personal. And in this book, I got more personal than with the first one, and it wasn't easy. It took me a long time. I don't know, some of you may remember years ago, and I'm dating myself now, there used to be a program on when I was a kid called Queen for a Day. And there were, 4 or 5 women would come out and they would all tell a sad story. And they had very legitimate sad stories. Somebody had a husband with a chronic ill condition who couldn't work. Somebody's house had burned down in a fire. Somebody else had something. They were really difficult stories. And at the end of the TV show, they would have all the women come out, and there was an applause meter. And the one who had the saddest story got the most applause and won the washer dryer, which in this day and age, that's adding insult to injury. Why not give her a sports car? But anyway, I didn't want to feel like I was doing that. But I do have to say that very often, and my friend Amir was very helpful with this. He told me that when I shared more of my story, that it actually was a more valuable experience. So thank you, Amir. You helped give me the courage to do that. So
you're welcome.
I will. Thanks. And so anyway, I did have, I guess, looking back, what would be considered an unusual childhood, and from the time of 7.5 on, really quite difficult. initially, as an infant, I was a first child to my parents. My father had a child from another marriage, but we didn't know about that, and that's another book. But anyway, I was born in the summer in New York. It was hot, very hot, and my parents lived in an apartment, and I had colic and would cry day and night. And there air conditioning, people just didn't have air conditioning in those days, so they would have to keep the windows shut so that they wouldn't upset the neighbors. So they were not very happy with me, and that came out later, that I was a difficult baby. And also in those times, my parents were kind of trendy, and they wanted to do everything right. And one of the child rearing philosophies at that point for babies was let them cry it out. So if you can imagine being an infant with horrible gas pains, crying alone for hours, it probably wasn't so much fun. And I'm not blaming my parents. They were doing what the book says. So, but that was my situation as an infant. And finally, they found out that it was actually more than colic. I was allergic to the formula. And so they gave me a special formula that was half goat milk and half soybean. And later on, it was discovered that very frequently soybean fields were heavily sprayed with pesticides. So that could have early on, I don't know, done something cellularly or whatever that introduced toxins into the system. But anyway, I got through the colic or the digestive food allergy or whatever, and life was normal for a while. Here's another personal thing that I'll inject. My family was 100% Italian. All my grandparents came from Italy. I was born right after World War II, shortly after World War II. So in those days in the United States, nobody was being ethnic, particularly if you were from a country like Italy. So my grandmother was Bianca, and I was named after her, but the anglicized version, Blanche. And as a kid, I didn't care for that name much, but then when I got older, I thought, oh, it goes well with Molle. It's got a flow, that's fine. When I went to the retreat in China, when I first discovered wisdom healing Qigong, and several months later went to the retreat in China, every morning there were about 25 of us, and it would be sort of like a roll call where the teachers would say each of our names. And whenever they'd get to my name, they would have such difficulty pronouncing it. And the poor teachers, they really wanted, it was a point of respect. They wanted to get the name right. And it wasn't even Branch. They had trouble with the end of it too, because if they had said Branch, I would have said, okay, I'll go with that. But they were really having trouble and struggling. So one day somebody in the group just, I guess, got kind of exasperated and said, is there another name they can call you? And so I thought, oh, my email says Bianca. I've always related to that name. So I said Bianca, not realizing that I was going to be sort of married to Qigong. I'm very grateful that I am. And so now in the Qigong community, that's how I'm known. So and to me, that represents maybe a return to the authentic self and to the love and confidence that one would hopefully have with a name. Because as a child, I felt a little bit, I didn't know why inside the family circle, I was Bianchina, little Bianca, but outside where people weren't all Italian, I was Blanche. So there was a little bit of confusion and maybe even some shame. Why can't I be one or the other? So anyway, for me, that represented, a little bit of a struggle in my childhood, but nothing much. And then I went to school, and I loved school, and wanted very much to have a baby brother or sister, and that did happen for me when I was 7.5. But within that year, my mother started going in and out of hospitals, and she had spinal issues, and eventually it was determined that she had a tumor on her spine. And she would be in the hospital sometimes for weeks at a time. And the older I got, the more I became responsible for not only getting good grades, but keeping up the house and cooking and taking care of my brother. And all that went on till my mother died when I was 17.5. I didn't feel that it was anything, I didn't feel that it was anything terrible, or I was doing what I could to help the family, and that was great. When I started mentioning this background and making public appearances, it seems that after each appearance, there are at least one or two people who will come up and share that they have Parkinson's, and that as children, they had somebody in the family who had a chronic condition, and they felt responsible, or had, or were caregivers. So, I know that it's often said that Parkinson's arises from, or one of the things that can help contribute to Parkinson's is childhood trauma, or early adult trauma. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, one big event. It can be something over time, like with this, dealing with a chronically ill family member. So I just wanted to mention that. And I also wanted to mention, again, turning things around, that when I'm in an anxious state, sometimes I look at, well, I got through this, and this, so I can certainly get through, my next appearance. That's nothing compared to what I had to do as a child or as a young adult or whatever. So sometimes if we look back, those of us who have had difficulties in our lives, and most of us have, we look back, we got through them. They weren't the end of the world. So we'll get through this next one too. And for me, perhaps the biggest teacher was my son. When I got married, my mother died. I went to college, had a teaching career, got married. My first child, healthy, beautiful, everything was fine. My second child, beautiful, but not everything was fine. He had autism, and we didn't get that diagnosis till he was like 4 or 5. But from birth, there were some very serious things going on. He had a seizure disorder, and they thought for a while that he was blind because he wasn't responding to stimuli at all. He was so shut down. So talk about anxiety. I didn't know what this child's future was. And for me, looking back, I've often said, my Parkinson's was not the worst thing that happened to me in my life. My son's autism was the worst thing. And I think ultimately that kind of prepared me for my Parkinson's diagnosis, because I hit the deck running when I had Parkinson's. When my son got his diagnosis, I went into depression, and I, for a while was immobilized, and things that happen very often to people with Parkinson's. That didn't happen to me with Parkinson's, because I thought about it, and then I thought, no, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, I'm not going there again. So I instead started, really trying to be an active advocate for myself. And I think that kind of put me maybe ahead of some other people who, as I said, it's a very normal reaction, very normal response to go into depression. Some people are in bed for a while after they get their diagnosis. But you don't have to stay there. Find your Qigong, get going. And so I think that the diligence that I had in caring for other people, my mother, my son, other people in my life, my students, I think that diligence and dedication, I finally learned to turn toward myself. And that's how I started my healing practice, which brings us to another chapter in the book, which is attitude. And I start that chapter by saying, why would a time-themed book devote a section to attitude? And my answer is, because you're wasting your time if you don't bring your best attitude to the practice. Now, I want to clarify here, because I've talked about how we can bring anxiety to the practice or anger to the practice, and we can work on it there. And that's great. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about, and I've seen this working with people, that they want to begin their practice. They look at the DVD or the video online or whatever of the master or the teacher, and they automatically think that they can't do it because they can't look the same way, that they can't do the form the same way as the teacher. That's one reason why I've spent time showing you some of the adaptations and modifications and things like that. It's important to do the practice from wherever you are. From wherever you are, you start. And you can, and while you're perhaps not all the way there, or for instance, some people when they're doing lift chi up, pour chi down, can't get both hands to go all the way up. Well, visualize the hand that can't go all the way up, visualize it there. And if it's bothering you too much and shaking too much and you need to put it on your navel, then go ahead. But keep visualizing, and little by little, every once in a while, try moving the hand and see what happens. So anyway, bring your best attitude and a can-do attitude to the practice. It doesn't mean that you can do it at this moment exactly as the master is doing it, but it means that you can do it in your way and with your intention. And the intention is so important. So please do not be a harsh self-critic. And along with that comes patience. Another very important part of attitude is patience. And I would suggest patience in several ways. Number one, when you do the practice, do it as slowly as you can. Make the movements as slow as you can. And that can be more challenging, but the slower you go, the faster you heal. This is not calisthenics. You know, you can do that at the gym, and that's really good for you. That's great. But that's not what you do when you come into your place to do Qigong, when you're in the Qi field. You are connecting with the energy. You are bringing the energy in. You are guiding the energy out. It's a very slow practice. Whatever movement you're doing, please do it slowly. And I know that some people listen to some of the materials from Ming Tong, and some of people, when they're new and they start with me, they say, is there something wrong? There's such long spaces in between. And I said, no, that's a pause. Learn to love the pause. Learn to live in the pause. That's a pause. That's what going slow is. And I constantly have to remind myself of that, to be slower, even in my speech, to slow down, and to pause more. And, you know, for many of us, that's uncomfortable. I think that's where these people were coming from. And I know the first few times that I listened, I thought the same thing. What is it? Is there something wrong with the CD? No, that's the pause. Enjoy it. Breathe through it. So anyway, you do the practice slowly. And also you have to have the patience to do the practice often. If you have a chronic condition that you're working on, you really need to practice several hours a day. Not everybody is as fanatic as I am. I started at 3 hours, and, you know, the first day did 3 hours and continued. I was also at a point in my life where I could do that because I had retired. So later on, and in the book, I make suggestions for how to, you know, if you have less time, how to do that. But I also want to clarify here that when I say 3 hours, I didn't do 3 hours all at once most days. I did it basically in 30 to 40 minute chunks. And I think that that's really a goodly amount of time, because we want to, I felt, and that's why I did lift chi up, pour chi down 3 times a day. It's the longest practice. And I felt that it got me into that happy chi space for the longest period of time. So I was connected with the energy for the longest period of time. So that's why I like doing that. But the awakening practices as well, or sometimes they're called the preliminary practices, which are not lift chi up, pour chi down. It's spinal bone marrow and hip rotation and la chi, wall squats, bending spine, crane's neck. Those are your awakening practices. And, you know, I would suggest doing those in larger blocks of time too. If you can devote at least 20 minutes, that's fine. But have the patience and do try and practice, you know, I tell people who are working, maybe you can get in an hour to an hour and a half every day. And so have the patience also over time. You know, this is not it's not the Qigong Olympics. It's not the healing Olympics. Some people want to know approximately how long it took me to heal because they want to beat that record. And, you know, we're not playing beat the clock here. We're all different, just like every one of us has a different handwriting. You know, we all have different bodies, different neurologies, different skeletons. We're all going to heal differently and in different ways. And one thing that I noticed with my healing was that I healed from Parkinson's, what might be considered rather quickly. It took, you know, somewhere in the span of over 2 years physically. I'm realizing, and even then I question, you know, the doctors told me at that point, you don't have symptoms, go. But when I see how strong I feel now and how strong my body feels now, and I think of what it felt like then, maybe I didn't have Parkinson's, but I was really in a weakened condition. And that Qigong and other exercise has now helped me. So, helped me relieve that. And I'm much stronger now. So anyway, and mentally as well, mentally and emotionally, I healed. But there's a matrix of being healed as well, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And every day is getting better and better all the time in every way. So have the patience. I've been working with people who are working over the long term, and they're seeing improvements. The thing that they're doing is having not an expectation, but a vision or a goal. And that was how I viewed my practice as well, was that every day I would say, well, today I'm feeling better than I was yesterday. If that's as far as my healing takes me, I'm still better off than I was. And I also thought about, because I had a number of people say, well, you don't know if this is going to last. It could reverse at any time. And I thought, I don't think so. But if it did, I would be grateful for the time that I had that I felt better. So I never got into that negative space. And thinking positive is so important. And in this new book, I have a very short paragraph in one of the chapters on Qi Rain, and it's a very short meditation on how to transform negative to positive thoughts. And I don't think I'm going to get to that today, but I did want to share that with you. Another thing that really helps attitude is having a gratitude appreciation practice. And I didn't realize at the time that's part of a healing regime for a lot of different disciplines. And I didn't know that. I just kind of started doing it on my own, which I think shows the beauty of this practice. It leads you to the right places. So every night, I think of 3 things that I have to be grateful for or appreciative of. And also, that's another thing, that's another practice that I do when I talked about muting the sound. If that horrible, scary commercial comes on, mute the sound, think of things to be grateful or appreciative of. And this didn't happen for me right away, but in the last few years, I've noticed, and I've read about this, that the more you meditate, the more colors become brighter, flowers become more defined. I'm experiencing all that, and it's amazing, and I'm loving it. And doing any form of wisdom healing Qigong is doing meditation, because even when you're doing the movements, it's a moving meditation. So have patience, have appreciation. The more you appreciate, the more you will find to appreciate. And I wanted to just share here also that it's great to appreciate. There's some things that are very easy to appreciate. Other things are more difficult. Like I explained, my son's autism or difficulty in my childhood. Another thing recently, life was going very smoothly for me. I had healed, and now I'm working with people and writing books and making appearances. Oh, this is, I'm so grateful. This is all wonderful. Then the political climate changed in this country, and for me, it was difficult. And I started, what could I do? I didn't want to just sit with negativity. So I started, signing petitions and going to marches and rallies and things like that. And I found a very positive energy there. And and for me, I felt youthful because I was a child of the 60s. So I protested in college. Here I am again, deja vu all over again. So I learned to find something positive there too. And so the quote, I never forgot the quote of J.P. Shanley, who was the screenwriter for the movie Moonstruck. And when he got up to accept his Oscar, he said, "I'd like to thank everyone who ever punched or kissed me in my life, and everybody who I ever punched or kissed." And that's the idea. All healing is about transformation. We're transforming physically, but we're also transforming mentally and emotionally. So bring a positive attitude, and when things are negative, find the flip side. It's there. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about practice tips, and I think I've actually already gone into some of that, but you can practice yourself out of a challenging mood, like I said earlier. Go slowly, and the 40-minute or 30-minute sections are really helpful if you can find that long of a segment of time to practice. And I wanted to read to you a little something from the book, because sometimes it's why reinvent the wheel. It's what I wrote, and I think I said it clearly enough. So one of the things that people get concerned about when they come to the practice, when they're trying to decide if they want to commit, is they ask, what about time and money, family, and social obligations? And so I say, there is another aspect to the no time issue that I have observed first in myself, and now as I work with others. What about family, friends, co-workers, obligations, finances? Well, what about these concerns if the Parkinson's continues to progress? In other words, you're going to have to deal with it one way or the other. You're going to have to make time either to be well or to be sick. Often people delay starting a program that could help them recover their health because they are wary of making the commitment. So they waste time getting started. When looking at energetic healing, one must take the long view and reorganize priorities. Healing yourself is currently your main work. There is usually some price to pay. An example occurred when I made my decision to attend my first retreat. My first retreat occurred several months after being introduced to wisdom healing, or Qigong. It was held in China. Prior to any of this, my family and I had planned a Yosemite vacation. I was going to spend a week of quality time with my older son, his wife, and the grandkids. Now this idyllic vacation was in conflict with the healing retreat. I felt torn, but took the long view. I wanted my loved ones to have the healthiest possible me for the longest possible time. I told myself I could do Yosemite another summer. I knew this was my healing time and entered into the flow of that concept. Here's an update. I haven't been yet to Yosemite, but I don't regret it. Another question that comes up is, I'm just resisting practice, even though I enjoy it. What can I do? So there's another aspect of resistance to practice that sometimes emerges, and it's disguised as not having the time. I found that people with chronic conditions are often kind, loving, and patient with everyone but themselves. At times, they don't like themselves very much, sometimes due to the difficulties separating themselves from the condition. You know, I have this condition. It doesn't mean I am this condition. So 2 suggestions for dealing with this are treating the condition like a visiting professor. It has come to teach you much about yourself, self-compassion, and self-love. And when its job is done, envision yourself saying goodbye to it. Make a list of things you like about yourself. And sometimes people have difficulty with that. And if that's too difficult to start with, list what others like about you and keep expanding the list. I also want to share here, I am not a medical or psychological professional. This is simply my own take on my own healing. I don't know if you want to call it kitchen table wisdom or whatever, but I'm not in any way suggesting that you don't see a doctor or a therapist if you feel that you need to. These are just, I'm explaining some things that came up for me and that have come up for others, and these suggestions have worked. It's very possible that you may need to do something a little different, and Qigong works very well with all kinds of Western medicine and Western therapies as well. So I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, so for tips on being mindful of your Qigong practice, again, I talk about muting the sound. I think I've mentioned that enough now that you probably want to mute me, so I'm not going to say any more about it. Also replacing invading negative or stressful thoughts with Haola, that beautiful blessing, all is well and getting better. And I very early on in my practice, I picked up on that. So it actually was part of my, part of my healing time. And I think I need to mention this. Besides the formal practice that I did at least 3 hours of every day, very early on, I took the Howla practice to heart and to brain. And whenever I was like getting out of the car in my parking lot, going from the car to the supermarket, as I was walking, I would silently say to myself, because I didn't want people hearing me thinking I was crazy, but silently, with each step, Howla, Howla, Howla. And then as I was driving, and sometimes, even now I still do it, and it's become sort of like, my go-to or my default position. So I'll be stopped at a red light, and I'll think, what's that going through my mind? Oh, it's Howla. So that's another way to informally bring the practice into every aspect of your life. So just repeating that can be a mantra in itself. So that's what I wanted you to know about some of the practice tips. And basically, what I told myself and what I would like you to tell yourself is, time is on my side when I'm on my side. I had to laugh yesterday because, the book that I'm talking to you about is Make Time to Heal. And the way things were going yesterday, I wasn't sure I was going to have time to get everything set up and everything presented. And then I realized, whoa, wait a minute, you wrote this whole book, Make Time to Heal. You do have the time, just follow it through. You know what you need to do. Put one step in front of the other. I think Anne Lamott wrote a book, Bird by Bird. Just put one thing before the other, and you'll get to where you need to go. So it's really important that you give yourself the time and realize that you have the power to do that. Some more practice tips are to start off your day with energy. Please, please, please start off your day with some Qigong. I suggest a minimum 5 to 10 minutes of La Qi when you're in bed, before you even get out of bed. I do at least 10 minutes every morning of La Qi. And one thing that I didn't mention earlier when we were doing the La Qi and when we were doing the spinal bone marrow rotations is that you can drop your intention into the middle of that Qi ball, your healing intention, whether it be for something physical to do with yourself or a family member or a loved one, even a pet, or very often when I'm doing my intentions now, I drop the White House and everybody in the Senate, Congress, and everybody, and send them love and energy. They need so much positive energy there. So whatever it is that that you want to do, but start off the day with La Qi, and it's particularly helpful if you have something going on later on in the day that you think is going to make you anxious. Or what I do, like before I meet with a client, I set aside a few minutes before I meet with each client, and I sit before the computer screen and I do some La Qi, and I visualize that we're going to have a very effective and engaged session. So you can bring it to anything, but start your day, hopefully, not only with some meditational practice in bed, but also when you get up. If you could do maybe a few of the awakening practices, that would be a really good thing. So again, just start your day with some practice, because I find that people who don't, very often, then the whole day gets away from them, because they'll say, oh, I didn't do it this morning, so my Qigong is done. I'm gone. I've lost it for today. It's, excuse me, it's very important not to break the chain. When you're in a healing mode, really try to get it every day, at least some practice. And one of the things that I suggest, and it's worked really well for a number of people, is the 100-day Gong. And that is, the ancient Chinese knew, I think, way ahead of where we are now scientifically, that by constantly repeating something is how you learn it. And I think science has told us now it's 90 days. And then I've heard some people say now they've shortened it to 30 days. But if you're dealing with a chronic neurological condition, I would say at least 90 days. The 100-day Gong is beautiful. And what that means is you're committing to doing 100 days of the practice every day, and assign a time period, like I'm going to do 2 hours every day, or an hour and a half, or 3 hours, whatever you can do, and stick stick to that. And it can be a specific practice that you're doing, or specific practices, or it can just be, I'm going to devote this much time to practicing. The way that I learned about Qigong is that, say you commit to 2 hours. If you skip one day, then the next day you have to do 4 hours. If you skip 2 days, the next day you have to do 6 hours. If you skip more than that, then you just have to go back to square one and start on day one again. There's a wonderful little gong chart that you can actually chart your progress with. And it's available, I think it's available on my website now, but if not, you can email me via my website. There's a form there, but I'll also give you my email right now. And I'm going to give you a different email than I think the one is on my website, because this one is shorter. Either one is fine. This email is bmolle, MOLLE, 17 @gmail.com. BMOLLE 17 @gmail.com. And so if you want, I can send you one of those handy dandy charts, and then you can print it up. And I used it and found it very helpful. So start off your day with some positive energy. And another thing that I would suggest is, if you're healing from a chronic condition, do the sound healing daily. You know, I really think that when you're dealing with a chronic condition, you're dealing with so much that you really want to make sure that you visit all the organs and shower them with energy every day, and get them all connected and speaking to each other and communicating with each other, which is another, you know, that's more visualization that you can do when you're doing the sound healing as well. So, and staying motivated with the 100-day gong is one way to do it. Another way is to have a coach, or someone to work with on a regular basis. I see people weekly, but they can check in with me via email or whatever, and if they need to talk more, they can. Or sign up. There are, you know, a number of online classes with wonderful teachers, and I would say sign up for a daily class if you can. And a lot of these, the class may broadcast at one time, but very often they're videotaped, so that you can, if it's not at the time convenient for you, you can go back and visit later. These are all ways to support your daily practice. Also, you know, if you can get to a retreat, that's wonderful, or a workshop, that's a great thing to do. So those are just some of the tips that are available in the book. And I wanted to just check in for a minute. Amir, how are we doing on time right now?
We're good on time.
So do you want me to talk some more, or do you want to go into Q&A? I just want to know where we are in terms of that.
Yes, either way. I actually have a question about your coaching, your consulting.
Yes.
How do you work with clients? Like, what is a typical session like? What goes on?
Oh, wonderful. Okay, you know, the session depends on where they are in the practice. So for somebody new who's doing an original consultation, I'm just getting to know them. First, I send out, before we even meet, I send out a health survey with some questions about, you know, their lifestyle, their diet, what they're doing in terms of physical practice, of, you know, whether they're going to a gym or walking or whatever, you know, questions like that. What if they're on medications, if they have any other conditions, so that I can be informed when we have our first session. So a first session is a little bit different. And then first session is often a lot of talking about the practice and and teaching. And originally, you know, in the first few sessions, I'm doing maybe more teaching, and it's all so individual, because depending on where they are and where their bodies are, I may be doing suggestions like I did here, or other suggestions of how to do the practice. Also, talking about, you know, their goals, a lot of reassuring that if tremor increases, that's okay. keeping track with them of how they're feeling. And, you know, have they gone up or down from the last time? So usually each session ends with a next step. And it's not always, I don't always give homework, but sometimes I do. But there's, oh, you know, the expected homework is that you're going to do the practice. And a lot of times people need just a lot of support around that initially, getting into a daily practice. So whatever resources I have, some of the things that I just talked to you about, and then, like I said, practicing together. A lot of times they want to ask me personal questions. You know, here's where I realize that even though I'm just little old Bianca, you know, that because I've been through it, they want to know, well, did this happen for you? For instance, in the last couple of years, I've heard from at least 3 people who actually read my book, started a practice, you know, maybe went to a retreat or something, and got themselves mostly healed. And then they wanted to check in with me because basically with these people that I'm thinking of, they either had just tremor left or tremor and anxiety left. And they wanted to know, is that what the end looked like for you? And I said, yeah. And then I talked to them more about how to accept the tremor. Because in my book, I wrote about how I accepted the tremor. And I did. But I have to confess here, I'd be lying if I didn't say that every once in a while, not all the time, but every once in a while, I just thought, gee, if I just cut my arm off, I wouldn't have Parkinson's, you know? So I assure them that, you know, sometimes you think it goes that way, but just jump right back into the practice. And what I learned was to love and accept myself. I had ridden myself of enough Parkinson's that it wasn't interfering with very much at all. The tremor didn't interfere with very much at all. Maybe it didn't look pretty, but I gave myself permission that it was okay. And I think it was at that point when I started really accepting that, oh, I might be left with this tremor. That's okay. That's when it started to disappear. And also talking to people about, you know, reassuring, because sometimes you're going through a practice, you're doing the practice regularly, healing is occurring, but then another symptom pops up. Well, what's that about? And that happened to me in that my tremor, when I started the practice, I had tremor in my left hand and arm, and it was my right leg that was mostly affected, but not my right leg. I had a foot drop and some tremor, but my right hand and arm were not affected. As I was healing, I started getting some tremoring there, which actually makes sense because the energy was going through. And what I told myself, I didn't know, but I told myself, this disease is going in fast forward. And so it would have eventually been in my right arm. And so it's doing that quickly now. It's going to go down and out. And so that kind of thing. So it's very individualized. I'm glad you asked. I don't know, is there any part that I could expound further on, or did that kind of give you an idea?
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you, Bianca. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to put them in chat or open your mic to ask them. We do have a comment from our friend Victor. He writes, I have used sound healing when I'm driving, which has helped me very much with my voice. It also helps me with anxiety of other drivers' bad habits.
I'm so glad you shared that, Victor, because in my book, I wrote not to do it when you're driving, but that's me. Okay, I was sharing from my experience because I get too into it, you know, because when I started doing it, and now it's the way I started doing it is the way I always do it, with an eye pillow and my feet up, and you know, and I just really, I really focus on everything. But I totally agree that it helps with voice, because it certainly helped with mine. So if you can do it that way, that's fine. I have another form. I have a chakra healing meditation that I do when I'm driving that focuses on color, and I look for the colors around me. So, you know, I do a sound healing when I drive, but for me, because of how I approach that one, I go too deep. I can't do it when I drive. So maybe when I revise the book, I might want to contact you, or if you would be kind enough to contact me, I'd like to add that, because, you know, it takes a village. That experience is very helpful. Thank you.
Yes. Bianca, can you share your practice?
Because I don't see any questions.
Yes.
Hello?
I know.
Hello?
Can you hear me okay?
Hello? Amir?
Yes.
Amir, where are you?
Can you hear me?
What's happening? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, we went out for a while.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. So I don't have the chat screen. So are there any other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to ask you about your practice. I know when you first started, you went to a Ming Tong workshop, and I think he said for you to practice 3 hours a day. May I ask you, like, what sort of practices were you doing when you
Okay,
first
thank you.
started? Yeah.
Sure. So when I started, now remember that was almost 10 years ago now. So wisdom healing Qigong in this area was not as, it wasn't as widespread as it is now. There were few teachers and few classes and few opportunities. So most of my practice was done with DVDs and CDs, which I think is good news for people who say, well, I'm too far away to ever, or I can't afford it or whatever. I mean, most of my practice was done that way. It's not how I would recommend it. If you can get into a group, that's better, but obviously it works. So the only level 1 DVD that was available at that time was Lift Chi Up, Pour Chi Down, and Sound Healing. So awakening practices are easy enough to learn, but they weren't to do that very much. So that's why I basically did that DVD, which took 40 minutes, because it was 22 minutes for Lift Chi Up, Pour Chi Down, and then the additional for standing meditation. So I did that 3 times a day, and the sound healing was 40 minutes. I did that at least once daily. And then the other time with some meditational CDs, and I don't think the one that I use is available anymore. It was called Awaken the Light Within. But there are a number of meditations that I think are available. Or you can just meditate with La Chi, So that was my basic practice. And then as I learned the awakening practices, I added them more, but I became so fond of Lift Chi Up, Pour Chi Down. And I have to say, for me, that's the one that's that and spinal bone marrow rotations and La Chi are the 3 for me where I feel the most energy. So those are, and now I do them all. And I didn't mention some of the other practices that we don't see as much of, like push the mountain or ring the temple bells, where you're swinging from side to side and hitting your kidneys, and then your shoulder, then your clavicle, and then patting yourself on the back. And that's a good one for when you wake up in the morning too. Yeah.
Yes, great. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Maybe I can ask a question. And I find the words to,
Thank you.
Yes, to speak them in English. The Qigong for me is all about harmonization with nature, both natural and consciously. And I wonder how that was for you in the beginning, before or when you started Qigong. How did you experience harmony between you and and nature, or the universe, as you want to, whatever name you want to give it? But how did you experience your inner life and the outer life all together? Maybe a large question.
That is a large question. I love it, and I'm probably going to be rambling because the answer is going to be formulating as I speak. But for me, the inner world I was so happy to be back there. I felt like I had been there as a child. And I often thought of the poet William Wordsworth, the child is the father of the man. And that place in childhood that was so magical and so mystical, where I felt that everything was possible, was now reappearing for me. And I realized it was always there, but I just had to tune into the chi channel, and life had gotten me away from that. So that inner voice was getting stronger and stronger. And that's such a healing voice with such a healing message. And so I kept listening to that inner voice, and that helps me now with challenges, because I realize that, you know, I feel that I've been gifted with this healing, and that it's my mission now to share it. And it's not always an easy mission, because, you know, when I first healed, I thought, okay, everybody's going to do what I did. They're all going to do Qigong. They're going to all do it 3 hours a day, and everybody with Parkinson's is going to be better very soon. That's not exactly how it works. I learned that later, you know, that we're all different, and we have different the condition affects us differently, and we respond to it differently. But that inner voice, you know, that's one thing that I tell people that I work with, you know, keep an ear out for that inner voice. So that, and I listen to that all the time now, that inner wisdom. And that's part of what comes across in my meditations too. And I think I even mentioned in the book that, you know, I've read that in dreams, sometimes people get very creative ideas. And I find that in meditation, that happens for me. And I think a meditative state is often like a dream state. And I don't by any means want to suggest that I go off on a cloud somewhere. You know, I don't think my meditation is that good, but it's good enough to get me where I need to go. And you know, constant distractions, that's okay. You know, I wave goodbye to them. So as far as the inner voice and the inner harmony, and the sound healing helps so much with my organs. I listen to them now. You know, they talk to me and I listen. And then as far as the harmony with nature, like I explained earlier, you know, I noticed over the past few years, colors are brighter. I'm noticing the definition of flowers, you know, I've always loved nature. I've always loved animals. But now if I walk outside my door and I see a squirrel running up a tree, I really feel something in my heart, which I didn't used to. Or I'm taking my meditative drive in the country and I see a pasture full of cows and horses. I feel something in my heart. You know, I just used to think, oh, those are nice, those are cute. But now I feel it. And it's very interesting because recently I had to go to the eye doctor, the ophthalmologist, and she said, oh, I don't know if we told you this before, but you know, you have a little bit of cataract. And I said, oh, really? She said, well, yeah, everybody gets that as they get older. I said, well, how would I know I have it? What does it do? She said, well, colors appear dimmer. And I thought, that's not my problem. So obviously something's going on there too. So yeah, it increases the harmony, increases the level of joy. And that then gets you on a higher vibrational level for healing. So and it's exponential. So is that what you meant when you asked your question?
Yeah, I would maybe some words that I picked up from you was like inner harmony, like experience from inside, being from the heart connected to what happens outside of you, and see beautiful things around you is more conscious thing as well as experienced in nature. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, I love the question. Okay. So I don't know if there are more questions, or how are we doing on time, or what should we do?
Yeah, are there any other questions? Or I was thinking, Bianca, maybe we can close with if you would like to lead a meditation or some lachi, we can all join in.
Yes, that's exactly because of the situation where it's hard to do too much standing. I'm not going to do lift chi up, pour chi down. You wouldn't see very much. But I thought I would oh, I see the light is getting too much in the way. Let me see if I can, should I get up to close this curtain?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, excuse me a minute, folks. Morning has broken in Marin, California. Okay, let's see if that's better. Yeah, that's, I think, a little better. So, yeah, this again, you know, one of the things that I love about Qigong is that I learned, you know, Ming Tong had said, and I took it to heart, healing is a creative process.
Yes.
And so I really believe that, and we can put our own fingerprint or thumbprint on anything. So this is a La Chi practice that I have come to use for myself. And it's always a little different because I'm just, I'm being spontaneous about it. But I just wanted to mention, we've talked so much about transformation. And that's what we're doing when we're healing. And, Metamorphics is the name of my company, which is, where metamorphosis of the butterfly is my symbol.
Yes.
When I was first diagnosed, I bought myself a refrigerator magnet that said, just when the caterpillar thought the world was ended, it became a butterfly. And I looked at that magnet every day, and I looked at that message every day. I didn't know I was going to find Qigong. I didn't know this was going to happen, but so I love the butterfly, and even the little smock that I'm wearing has butterflies on it. And so this is what I call my butterfly healing meditation. So, and then I guess what we'll do at the end of the meditation, we'll just put our hands over, and then that's it, right? Or I want to make sure I get the ending right.
Yes, that's it, I think. And if you like, we can all join in.
Oh, of course.
With the La Chi.
I'm planning on that.
Yeah, if people
Please.
like, you can unmute yourself and whatever words that you would like to use, Haula or Kai.
Yeah, we're going to be doing Haula, and then I'm going to be saying some things in between the Haulas like I did earlier. Just let me take a sip because my throat's a little dry.
If everyone like, you're welcome to unmute yourself.
To what?
I'm just asking our participants if they would like to unmute, and we can all join in the words. Nice.
Let me know when I should start. Okay, so I'm going to start with a very quick establishment of Qi field because we don't have a lot of time, but we'll get to all the four. We'll get to the compass points. So
sure. Take your
head
time.
touches sky, feet stand on earth, body relaxed and humble, entire body harmonized with Qi, harmonized with Qi, harmonized with Qi. Front of body expands beyond these walls, beyond the horizon to infinite space. Back of body expands beyond these walls, beyond the horizon to infinite space. Left and right sides of bodies expanding to infinity. Bahui expanding up, up, up to the heavenly Qi. Heavenly Qi, earthly Qi, human Qi, harmonizing as we begin this meditative practice of La Qi. And this is the butterfly meditation. Remember that we're making the movement from our shoulders. So it's a wingspan, like we're butterflies. And so we're going to open. Ha. Ha. Imagine every hurt or loss or sorrow or grievance or injury appearing as a bruise, appearing as a bruise with beautiful colors. Purple, yellow, blue, green. These bruises take a shape, the shape of a butterfly. Be prepared to release the butterflies as they transform from bruises to beautiful butterflies that we release as they spread their beauty and love to all the planet, bringing love, beauty, and healing Release. 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 Love. Heal. Healing goes inward. To all organs, to all glands, to all muscles, all nerves, to all cells, to all mitochondria, to all synapses, to all telomeres. Healing goes deep inside. Releasing butterflies flying, seeing their beauty, healing from that beauty, transforming. All is well, and getting better as we cultivate and we harvest beautiful chi, the healing chi, the loving chi. Slowly, gently, hands over navel, woman right hip goes to wrist. Making counterclockwise circles in multiples of 3. Hands still over the navel, and then slowly, gently, bringing hands together, slowly, gently, opening eyes. We give thanks to the Chi field, to all energy teachers, and to ourselves for doing this beautiful practice. The healing continues. All is well. So be it.
Thank you, Bianca. Beautiful practice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much for making time. So good to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so good to see everyone. So until we meet next time, take care, everyone. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Paula.
Hola. Thank
Hola.
you. Hola.
Okay, take care. We'll see everyone next time.